Hey there. Welcome back to another episode of How to Scale an Agency. I'm your host, AJ Quesada, co-founder of Revenue Boost, where we help agencies get more leads through cold email, get clients, and grow. And I'm very excited today to talk about client retention and how you can decrease churn in your agency and maximize your LTV, which is your customer lifetime value. I'm excited about this because it's been a huge learning lesson for me over the last couple of years. And I realized this is one of those things that's not talked about as much, right? Like it's not as much fun to talk about as marketing or sales. That's what everyone's talking about. That's what all the courses online are about, right? Is how to get more sales, how to get more clients. And we talk about that a lot. Of course, that's important. Every business needs sales and you need to have a healthy pipeline. But this doesn't get enough attention. And I think it's because it's one of the more non-sexy, but really, really important parts of building a business. And I've been in the service business my whole career. Like I started out working in the construction business, did that for 5 years, working in marketing and sales there. So that was a lot of client relationships. Then I built an agency as well as a consulting coaching business. So I've always been in different aspects of different businesses, but always been in the client relationship and service business. So all these principles I'm sharing today are just from 10 years of that, as well as the hundreds of agencies I've been able to work with and coached, and just taking a look inside of their client retention processes or lack thereof. I've learned a lot as well, so I've distilled all that down. I've got a lot of really good notes today. This is going to be just something that can absolutely transform your business because some of these things are really easy to implement and can help you keep your clients for so much longer and also make it a lot easier to upsell them and just, again, extract more value and profit from each client, right? So I've got a lot of notes here. This might end up being something we just make into 2 parts, but anyways, let's get into it. Also, just real quick favor from you. If you've been following our podcast for a while, our YouTube channel, please, wherever you're listening, please like and subscribe. And if you can, give a review. If you're listening on the iTunes or Spotify, I would love it if you could give us a review. You might already know this, but we don't do any sponsorship on the podcast at this point. We don't really monetize it. We just do this to share our lessons learned as agency owners and help all you guys out. So it would mean the world to us if you could at least help us boost the podcast by leaving a review. And if you're on YouTube, you could just like, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate it as well. Anyways, let's talk about client retention. So first, this is the epiphany I had on this. This is why this matters. And also, I'm giving a lot of examples from an agency today because I know most of you guys listening are agency owners, but this really applies to any service business. Even if you're a software company, like I know there's some people listening that are SaaS business, software company, a lot of these lessons still apply. They're not always directly transferable, but you can still take the same principles, right? Like the reason why people would stop paying for something and they would cancel a service, it's the same across the board, right? So although the mechanics of implementing these might look different, if you're a SaaS business versus an agency, it's really going to boil down to the same kind of core principles just about psychology and why people stay with a service or a provider, right? So keep that in mind. And I think really like if I had a SaaS business, I'd be looking at businesses that are really good at service, like agencies, right? For examples, right? And just think, how could I try to make that scalable within a SaaS, right? So anyways, epiphany I had on this is, I realized that this is a couple years ago, I didn't really pay much attention to this because I think that as first, when you first get into entrepreneurship, you focus a lot on marketing and selling, right? So the epiphany I had was that I had been spending years as an entrepreneur really just trying to get good at marketing and selling and thinking that that's all I need to do to build my business, right? Because of course, more sales means the business grows more. But the epiphany I had on this was that mindset changes as you grow the business, right? So the way that you have to operate as a business owner in the early stages, whatever you want to call it, 5 figures a year, 6 figures a year, changes as you grow, right? So there's different skills required at different levels and different perspective you need to have, right? So I realized that as I grew the business more, the more I started to realize, okay, now I need to stop focusing on sales and marketing so much, and now I need to actually get really good at this fulfillment and churn and client retention thing, really the back end of the business, right? So basically, when you start a business, it's all about just having that hustle to promote it and sell it, right? So you're really more of a promoter in the beginning, and then you become more of an operator as the business grows, right? So it's normal that the way that you start a business is by just promoting it, shouting it to everyone, doing lots of sales calls, generating leads, getting really good at that side of things, right? And of course, that's always going to be important. You always have to do that to keep the business growing. But it's not just that, right? It can feel like just that because, again, you don't really need to have complex systems for operations and fulfillment in the beginning when you don't even have that many clients. In the beginning, you just need to hustle and grind and sell and get your business to a point where it's cash flowing enough where you can hire a team to really grow and scale, right? So what I realized is like, okay, I'm in this mindset of just always thinking about marketing and sales because that's what I needed to do to get here. Right? That's what you need to do to get the business off the ground. You need a lot of that kind of activation energy, right? So you kind of get stuck in that habit, you get stuck in that mindset, and then you don't really think about the other side of the business, the back end, and really becoming a master of that, right? So it's partly just like a mindset and an identity shift. But that was a big thing that I learned a couple years ago. And then once I started to focus more on client retention and just really master the game of again, the back end of the business, I just saw so many benefits through experience, right? I realized that it's really like insurance for your business is the way I look at it. When you have a healthy, happy client base, your business will always succeed, right? Because the way I think about it, worst case scenario, let's say that your business is having a really poor few months of sales. Let's say that something's happening in your industry, it's gotten a lot harder. Let's say that you had a sales team and your best sales guy left, whatever it was, right? If you even if sales are really down for some period, if you have a healthy, happy client base, you're always going to still make money and grow, right? And there's a lot of peace of mind and security with that, right? Because when your clients are happy, when they're getting great results, when they're satisfied with the service, at a minimum, they're going to stay. And best case scenario, like they're going to upsell, they're going to buy more, or they're going to refer people to you. So again, even if things are really, really tough with sales, you have this insurance knowing that I'm still going to have my clients keep paying. They're still going to come back and buy more. I can sell them other things, if I'm really in a pinch, right? I need to, think of some ideas of how we can generate more revenue. And they're going to at least give me referrals, right? So it's kind of like this foundation for your business that you can rely on to grow, where regardless of what's happening with the ups and downs of new client acquisition, you can know that, okay, as long as our base is being taken care of, as long as our clients are doing well and they're happy, we're always going to be able to keep making money from that, right? Which is really helpful if, things change with your industry, and things are changing for all of us, right? With AI, things are changing fast, right? And you don't know what could happen in the future for your business. Obviously, there's been turbulence with the economy over the last couple of years. We've, most agencies I know, pretty much everyone struggled a lot through COVID, right? So you don't always know what's going to happen, but it's good to kind of know that you have the safety net of a client base that has great retention and comes back to buy more stuff and refers you other people, right? So a couple of things I learned related to this is, doubling your client lifetime value is most of the time easier than doubling leads or sales. I'm not going to say all the time, but most of the time it is, especially if a lot of the things that I'm covering today are new to you and you haven't really taken the time to dive deep into retention and churn yet. But basically, if let's say your average client stays for 6 months, assuming you have a recurring service. And if you don't have a recurring service, if you have a project-based service like you do web design or software development or video production or something, you could just think about the amount of times a client comes back to buy something else rather than just, average months they stay. But ultimately, if your clients normally stay 6 months and you can get them to stay 12 months, well, you're essentially doubling the revenue, which has the same effect of doubling your leads or doubling your sales, right? But it's actually doing more than doubling your revenue. It's more than doubling your profit. It might be tripling your profit, right? Because you're doubling the revenue, but you don't have additional acquisition costs, right? If a client stays 6 months at 12 and then starts staying 12 months, or let's say a client buys a project from you once and now they buy it twice, yes, you're doubling the revenue, but also that second revenue or that extra 6 months, right? In the example of 6 months versus 12 months is more profitable because you didn't have to pay a salesperson. You didn't have to pay for leads, right? You didn't have to spend time or energy selling that person, right? So you're removing the marketing and sales costs out of the equation. So any revenue you get from client retention or upsells is so much more profitable, right? And also, again, it's typically just easier, right? Improving your service. A lot of these things are just kind of quick wins that most agencies don't do. Most agencies are pretty poor with client service and just really lack a lot of the basics. So if you just get good at a lot of these basics, you can easily double your client lifetime value. And that's, again, usually an easier problem to solve than doubling your lead flow or doubling your sales, right? Or doubling your sales team if you have a sales team, right? So essentially you can get double the revenue, triple the profit maybe, and it's, and it's a lot easier than the obvious solution, which most people think, oh, I want to grow my business, I want to double it. We need to double our sales. We need to double our lead gen, right? The other thing too is also it becomes easier to upsell when you improve your client retention, because the things that you would implement in your business that would make a client stay longer are typically things that just make them more satisfied with you, right? That's why they stay longer. So when you go to upsell them later, they're going to be more likely to say yes. A couple other notes on this before we get into some tactics, but when you invest in fulfillment and operations, I've learned that it can often bring more ROI than spending on leads and sales. So if you're spending money on marketing, like you're launching a cold email campaign, you're launching some paid ads, you're hiring an agency, whatever it is, that's always going to cost a good amount of money, right? But sometimes there's ways where you could improve your fulfillment and operations for really, really little cost, right? Like let's say you hired a part-time VA, right? An overseas VA that's maybe $200, $300 a month. And all this person did was check in with your clients once a week and send them a report. That would be a $200, $300 investment that could get your clients to stay in an extra month or two on average, for example, or get you an extra like referral per each client, right? So there's a lot of examples like that if you really think of them, and you'll get some ideas as we go through the rest of the go through a lot of tips and tactics here. But yeah, a lot of times there's these things you can have your team do that just take a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra cost in terms of their hourly or their salary, but make a huge difference, right? So that's like, typically when we think of investing in our business, we think of investing in marketing and getting more sales, right? But you could take that same money and invest it into your back end, and there could be small tweaks you can make that could help people stay a lot longer, right? So it's just a different way of thinking about things, right? Last point here is that this helps keep your profitability high as you scale. So again, I think the other reason why this isn't such a big topic of conversation, or a lot of people don't think about it early on, or why I didn't think about it so much early on in my entrepreneurial journey, is you typically have good profit margins when you start your agency, right? But the profit margins tend to just drop as you grow. So that's why for a lot of people, they're not thinking about this early on, but then later they just see their margins drop and then start to focus on this after the fact, right? But essentially, as you grow, your profit margins naturally can decline, right? Because your business overhead costs go up. You hire more people that are fixed costs like admin or management, right? Also, your acquisition costs like lead gen, they typically increase as you grow. They don't really decrease. Improving your customer lifetime value is like the best way to offset this, right? So the more that you improve your client retention, the more that you improve the amount of profit you make on each client. Another benefit of this too is that, if you know that you make more money per client, you can be more aggressive in your marketing, right? Like if I know that I only make $3,000 profit per client, well then I can't really spend that much to acquire a customer. I can't pay a salesperson that much, right? I can only pay whatever, maybe $500, $1,000 in terms of marketing costs, in terms of like, if I'm doing outbound or cold email or ads, I know that I only have that much to spend to get a client, right? Whereas if I make $6,000 per client, I have a lot more budget I can use to acquire customers and just be more aggressive with my marketing and do things that competitors can't do, right? So that's why this matters. I know there's a lot more that's beneath the surface than just the obvious things, right? Like obviously we all know if our clients stay longer, that's great, but there's a lot of these unexpected ways I've learned to help my business when I really started to double down on this. So let's get into some principles and tactics. First is that the most important principle you have to understand is that retention is all about results and the service and the relationship. Meaning it's really, in my eyes, it's 50%, like your ability to keep a client is 50% the results, as in like doing a good job for them, and 50% the actual service you're giving them and just the relationship you built, right? So like, in my opinion, it's really half the battle, right? It's not just about getting good results for your clients and doing good work is not enough to keep them. It's really not. And you've probably faced this, right? I guarantee most of you listening to this or watching this, you've probably lost a client that you did a great job for, right? It's happened to all of us. And it's kind of frustrating, right? It's like, hey, I did great work. We exceeded expectations. Why did they leave, right? But really, people's standards are higher. They don't just want to have good work. They want to have great service as well, right? So I learned this first when I actually 10x the client business. This is one of my first clients a long time ago, like 6-7 years back when I first started my marketing agency. It was an e-commerce store, and they were a really new brand. They were doing like $1,000 a month. So they had just launched this Shopify store, and I brought them to $10,000 a month. So they went from a grand a month to 10 grand a month. And I had they were the last client I expected that was going to leave, right? I was like, okay, we just blew up this guy's business and, probably changed his life, admittedly. So I wasn't even thinking, it wasn't even a thought that this client would leave. But then he left because he told me he wanted to cut costs and bring it in-house, which made no sense to me. And at the time I was super frustrated because I was like, this was a huge success story and I know that we were going to keep growing it more and more. And then he just left and I couldn't figure out why. But this is when I really learned that, again, getting clients results is only half the battle. The other half of the battle is customer service and relationships, right? And also, even if you're getting your client good results, they may not even know that you're getting them good results, right? Because our clients aren't the experts in the field like we are. They don't have the benchmarks like you do as the agency owner, right? Meaning they don't know what good is, right? So for example, if I was getting this client a 5x return on his ad spend and I 10x his revenue, he might have thought that was normal, right? He might have not known that was good. He might have thought, oh wow, Facebook must be easy. We can just do this in-house, right? But if I went out of my way to show him the results, show him the wins, show him how the results he was getting was above average and, all the things that we were doing to create that result, then he would have seen, okay, these guys are really onto something. I got to hold on to them, right? So at first I was, pissed off when this happened. I was frustrated. But then I, took time to reflect and realize like, this is my fault. I didn't really show the client that we were doing a good job. I didn't celebrate the wins. I didn't really show him how these results compare to what, what can normally happen, right? So yeah, I wasn't really communicating the value. So it's not just about the value you give to your clients, it's about the perceived value. So that's really, really important to remember. It's not just about value you're giving it to your client, it's more about the perception of value that they have, right? Do they know that they're getting good value from you, right? Are they aware of it, right? That's why I always say, like, celebrate all the wins, right? I always try to find every opportunity to celebrate wins with a client, and not just the big things, right? Not just like, oh my God, we had the best month ever, but even just the small wins, right? Even if we fix a small problem for them, I'll email them and be like, hey, look, we did this and this is awesome and this is going to help you because of this, right? So I always just try to, I would encourage all of you, try to find any opportunity to celebrate small wins with your customers. But yeah, overall, like the way I look at it now is if you're in the agency business, you're in the service industry. Think about it like hospitality, right? Think about your business the same way that a hotel operator or a restaurant would. Like imagine you went to a hotel and it was the most beautiful hotel ever and it was a great price and the rooms were perfect. It had everything you ever wanted. The restaurant was great. The drinks were great. It was in a great location. Like just imagine you're on a trip and everything about this hotel is immaculate and it's cheap, right? But the staff was extremely rude to you. Like they're just really rude for you, really rude to you. You call them, they never come. The front desk receptionist like made fun of your outfit or laughed at you or something like that. Like just imagine that you had just terrible service, right? You probably wouldn't go back and you'd probably leave them a bad review. If you go look online, if you go on Google Maps right now, and if you look at any restaurant in your city or wherever you live, if you look at a lot of the bad reviews, a lot of them are going to mention the service. It's not just, oh, this place had crap food, right? So yeah, like service is a huge part of it, right? So, if you think about hospitality, hotel business, restaurant, those businesses really try to focus on having great service, great staff, great atmosphere, because they know it's not just about the room they provide you or the food they give you, right? And I think you should really operate your agency the same way with that same principle in mind. The other thing too is that once I started to double down on client relationships and the customer service side of things, I realized that the stronger the relationship you have, the easier it is to weather through tough times. Because look, there's always going to be tough times with your clients. There's always going to be times where they're not so happy with the work, or a problem happens, or if you're doing any kind of like marketing for them. If you're a marketing agency, like there's always going to be times where the campaign doesn't work or they're having a low month of performance, right? So like there's never any completely smooth road with a client. It can always be rocky, right? No matter what industry you're in, no matter what you're offering. So the thing is though, when you have a really strong relationship with a client, when they trust you, when they like working with you, when they like the way that you do business and the service you provide for them, they're going to be more forgiving of problems, right? But if the relationship is purely transactional, like if there's not much of a relationship, if there's not much communication, and it's really just transactional, then the second that there's a problem, the second that there's a low, like they're getting bad ROI or there's any kind of issue, they're going to leave, right? They're much less forgiving. So the stronger the relationship is, the easier it is to kind of deal with problems together and stay together. And they're just going to be a lot more forgiving because they're just going to like you more and they're just going to want to work with you, right? So yeah, that's really, really important to realize. And that was a huge learning lesson for me. So let's break it down. There's two parts. So we talked about how half the battle is improving your client results. Half the battle of retention is getting good results, right? The other half of the battle is improving the actual customer success process and building a good relationship, right? So let's break down each. I'm going to give you some of the best tips I've learned for each of these. So first we'll talk about client results, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is like getting your clients better results. This is mostly just a matter of getting good at what you do or getting better. And that's different for everyone, right? I know some people listening to this are SEO agencies or video production agencies or tech companies, right? Or marketing, like ads and funnel agencies, right? So this is going to be different for everyone. No matter like whatever you do, this is just a matter of getting better at your craft and your field, right? So I will give some general tips here on like just how to get better at your craft. But yeah, ultimately this is, the specific actions are going to boil down to, different things for everybody, right? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here with some of the most important things I learned, and then we're going to spend most of the time going through the customer success process because I think that's where most people lack. I think a lot of people, they usually have the opposite problem, right? They're usually good at getting their clients results or doing good work. They've been doing it for a while. But it's usually where the actual customer success process they lack. And it's because of what I mentioned earlier. most people think that just doing a good job is enough to keep a client, but it's not, right? So this other part gets neglected. So I'm going to spend most of the time giving tips on that, but let's go into client results. So again, this is just a matter of taking the time to become world-class at what you do. And this is just through practice, right? Trial and error. The more clients you have, the longer you're in business, the more you're going to get better at your craft, right? So for me, I run an outbound agency. We do cold email for our clients to generate them leads. And with every new client, we get better cold email because we just run more campaigns, right? So just know that you're going to keep getting better over time. Your team's going to keep getting better. But some other tips here, I would say niching down helps, right? If you're working with a lot of different industries, and if you're also offering multiple services, that just slows the process of you getting better, right? Because if we know that the more time we spend doing something, the better we get at it, right? Practice makes perfect. Well, then if our time is split between 4 different things, we're getting better at everything at a 25% rate, whereas we could get better at one thing at 100% rate if we only committed to that one thing, that one service or that one target client, right? So basically, the less you do, the faster you get better. That's what I've realized, right? So, we've talked in other episodes around the importance of niching down. I talk about this a lot on the podcast and on our YouTube channel because I think it's just one of the best things you can do for your agency, right? It's just instill more focus, but it really is useful for just getting better at getting clients better results because you just get more practice and more reps doing the same thing over and over again and just becoming a master at it, right? Whereas again, when your attention's spread more thin, you're just kind of slowly making progress and getting practice in each area, right? So if you need more convincing on niching down and trying to focus on one client type and one offer, then hopefully this is your final tipping point because it's going to make it so much easier to get clients better results when you can just focus on one problem all day rather than 10 different problems, right? Another thing too is in terms of improving client results, maybe you and your team are actually really, really good at the craft. Maybe you're really, really good at what you do for your clients and you're really experienced, but maybe there's just a lot of kind of randomness. Maybe there's not a lot of systems in your business, right? So a big part of doing better work for your clients and getting the results side down is just creating more repeatability in your business to make sure that the best practices happen consistently, right? So, actually, a couple of the recent episodes we've done on the YouTube and podcast recently where we had a couple experts come on, like Dave Jennings, to talk about systems and processes. Highly recommend you listen to that. But ultimately, you need to make sure that, you need to make sure that the way that you fulfill for a client is the same every time. And I don't mean that, obviously, if you do some custom work for clients or clients have different needs, that's fine. But there always has to be a structure for how you deliver to clients, how you onboard, how you fulfill, how you offboard, all of that, right? And this is as simple as just starting to document what are you currently doing, right? Just write down all of the tasks from start to finish that happen when you take on a client and you onboard them all the way through to when you offboard them, right? So you want to make sure that there's a consistent process happening for each client. That way you can make sure that things are happening that are supposed to happen, right? This could be, I find people usually have 1 or 2 problems, right? They're either maybe just not that good at the craft yet because they're kind of new and they haven't had a lot of experience yet, or it's a new agency, and that's fine. That's also why you should niche down because then you can just get better faster. But then it could be the other side too. It could be that you are very good at what you do, your team is as well, but they're just following different processes every time. They're not doing the same things consistently. There's not a lot of structure, so maybe important things are getting missed, right? That's why creating systems, creating repeatability is really important. And whoever's the best at whatever part of the process, right? Let's say you have run a video production agency, and let's say you have one person on your team who's really, really good at storyboarding. They're really, really good at coming up with the concept for the video and writing out the script, the scenes, all of that, right? Well, you should document what they're doing, right? Rather than someone else, focus on the person who's the best at it, document what they're doing, observe them when they complete their next project, and try to ask them why they do what they do, and document those down, write those down, and those should be in an SOP, right? So document the best practices. That's really important. If you don't have a lot of systems, then that might be the reason you might be losing clients, right? And then other than that, just keep mastering the craft. Even if you want. So one thing I've learned is once you start to build a team, it can be easy to lose a little bit of touch with your craft and your industry, right? So let's say you run a media buying agency, you run a paid ads agency, and eventually you hire a media buying team, and now you're being more of the manager, right? There's a point in your entrepreneurial journey where you stop becoming more of a technical doer and you become more of a manager, right? And it feels like most of your job is just kind of spent managing the business, managing the team, building systems, all of that, right? And the challenge with this is that, especially if you're in an industry like digital marketing where things just move really fast and things change a lot, you can easily become out of touch, right? So for me, I always try to stay involved in fulfillment to some degree, right? Because I always want to be like improving the craft and just kind of keeping an eye on things, right? And this helps me really stay sharp when I'm talking to clients as well or talking to prospects, right? So even if you are, even if you've relinquished yourself from having to do the day-to-day tasks and you have a team, that's great. But still make sure that you're committed to mastering the craft and not getting out of touch, right? So that's why you still want to be like chatting with your team on what are they doing, what's working for the clients, what are they learning, right? And just always study the craft. Attend events, attend conferences, get around people in your industry who are the best at the craft, right? And follow them all online and consistently learn from them, right? So this is always important, but this is especially important if you've started to like delegate and you kind of, because it's really easy just to become rusty at what you do and just lose touch, because I've definitely been there. So yeah, always just continue mastering the craft. And also last thing is try to stretch yourself sometimes, right? Sometimes it's really good to take projects or clients that are a little bit out of your comfort zone. And I know this can be a little bit contradictory with what I mentioned before about niching down, but sometimes it's good just to take a client that makes you nervous a little bit, right? A client that you haven't, maybe it's like a bigger project than you've dealt with before, or it's a totally new industry or whatever it is. Sometimes it's really good to do that intentionally, just so you can kind of stretch yourself, stretch your abilities, and just be able to, that's how you get better, right? You get better at going outside of the lines, right? Out of bounds. Because if you just work on the same client, same type of client, same type of problem all the time, of course you'll get really good at it, but you won't always be able to innovate or expand your skills or expand your perspective, right? So, there's sometimes where we're taking on a client and I'm a little bit nervous. I'm like, this is something we haven't dealt with before. Maybe there's something about that client that it's going to require a little bit of research and learning. But I've trained myself to now be excited for those and just realize that it's an opportunity to improve our skills, right? So those would be my best tips for how to, just get better at delivering your clients better results. But again, most of this is just going to come down to you just spending time on your specific craft, getting better in it, and just getting around people who are really good at the thing, right? But anyways, for the next part of this, I want to talk more about how to actually improve the other side, the other half of the battle, which is the actual customer service process and, how things that we've done that have improved our onboarding, our client management, our client communication, all of that. This has already been about half hour though, so I'm going to pause here and we're going to do a part 2 next week. So stay tuned for that because I want to go really deep into this next part and I don't want to have this be an hour and a half long thing. So anyways, hope you've enjoyed this part 1 of how to keep your clients for longer and how to maximize your customer LTV. Tune in next week where I'll go over the part 2 and we'll wrap up. All right, see you then.